Get in on the action this season with Underdog's Pick'em game. Select higher or lower between 2 and 8 players and compete for up to 325 times your entry. Use code DIRECTOR when signing up to receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick. Yoda Bolt fam, it's the Director, alive and well. Chargers fans, you know how I know it's officially the off-season, baby? Because the rumor mill is churning, and some pretty cool stuff is coming down the pipeline. You guys remember what it was like this time last year? Michigan just took down Washington in national title. We're all rooting for the Jim Harbaugh rumors. We don't really feel like this happens a lot, if we're being honest, Chargers fans. We're rooting for something and something happens. Well, it started happening last season. It was kind of cool, kind of neat. And this season, it feels like the rumor mill is starting up a bit earlier than it did last year in terms of player acquisition. The big one right now, of course, you guys have seen it probably everywhere by now. DK Metcalf rumored to be traded to the Chargers. Ahem. Can I just say that we called this one well before it started hitting the masses, right? My last video I posted, what was this, last Monday? This rumor started officially circulating yesterday. Monday, Angeles Chargers trading for DK Metcalf. There you go, man. We were on top of it. I think, honestly, this provides a lot of solid evidence that this could indeed happen. We're going to break down this rumor in today's video, show you guys why, in my opinion, this would be an awesome thing, and how the Chargers could pull it off here in the next, coming weeks as we're approaching free agency, et cetera, et cetera. Before we do kick things off, man, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog. Use code DIRECTOR to receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Newcomers, take advantage of the last few NFL games that we've got. Free pick here for Patrick Mahomes is available. It's a great way to support my platform and have some fun along the way. Before we kick off, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. Small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification. Helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, DK Metcalf. Action!
Who's got it better than us?
Into the end zone, Charger fans are witnesses to history.
DK Metcalf to the Los Angeles Chargers. Could you guys imagine? Now, you're going to see, in my opinion, what I've noticed throughout the comments, Twitter, my videos, Instagram, et cetera, the fan base of the Chargers, a little split on the whole idea of DK Metcalf coming, considering that, maybe last year, not a great year for DK Metcalf. We started seeing, JSN starting to climb the target share with the Seattle Seahawks and Geno Smith. Does that open up an opportunity, though, for the Chargers to swoop in and grab themselves a number one wide receiver to pair up with, we'll say, 1A, 1B, Lad McConkey? I think so, man. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of the video as to how much would it cost, what's the contract situation, let me make it clear on what's going on right here, okay? So a couple of days ago, I talked about how DK Metcalf coming to the Chargers, in my opinion, would be awesome. Probably one of the biggest moves I would endorse from the team this offseason, considering the specific needs this team has at wide receiver, the fit that we're looking for, contracts, et cetera, et cetera. And then a couple of days later, Jeremy Fowler would release an article that gave us a lot of information supporting the idea of DK Metcalf joining the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, on the surface, I was like, this is really cool, but this is what we would call, like a beat writer article, like a speculation by Jeremy Fowler, who likes to put this sort of content out in regards of, like, speculating what player would go here. Like, I think you talked about the Raiders getting Sam Darnold and Tyreek Hill to the New England Patriots. Well, he did make a prediction of the Chargers trading for DK Metcalf. However, this one was a little bit different because it was backed by an actual source, interestingly enough. And no, he didn't call me and ask me for my opinion and insight. He was anonymously donated a quote from an NFL coordinator close to the situation, saying the Seahawks can still get good value for him, DK Metcalf, and could pair with Lad McConkey for a good inside-out tandem. Justin Herbert to Metcalf would be scary. I think Los Angeles will be looking to help the quarterback in a big way. That's coming from an actual source. Now, again, the source themselves probably speculating as well, but the speculation on everybody's account in terms of destination, the fact that he could be moved, all of it is supported by the situation that DK Metcalf is in, that the Chargers are in terms of fit and coaching and all that kind of stuff. Let's start breaking it down a little bit. Now, the big reason you Chargers fans, myself included, and the big reason why I made it such a big deal in my last video, the reason that we want DK Metcalf, oh, and by the way, I totally completely forgot about this. The same day, actually, maybe even this morning, this was posted by Dan Henley in support of the idea. Of course, this photo was taken back in the day, of course, his time in Washington. But Dan Henley, DK Metcalf, these guys familiar with each other. Coincidence that he posted it on the same day as the news started to break? I think not. I think there's going to be some support and rallying for DK Metcalf in powder blue, not just his hair, this offseason. All right, so to continue what I was saying, Chargers fans, the reason why I want Ladd McConkey, the reason why I think a lot of Chargers fans outside of myself would love Ladd, of course we want Ladd McConkey, DK Metcalf, the reason we want him in powder blue is because it's a situation at wide receiver for the Chargers right now. I know Chargers fans everywhere saw it this season. Maybe some people don't think it's as bad because of how incredible Ladd McConkey ended up being towards the end of the year. Certainly the 200-yard performance in the postseason game leaves us on a lot of high hope for his talents going forward. But the fact of the matter is, it's simply not enough. Ladd McConkey, Justin Herbert, and this offense need help. And the biggest way you're going to provide that is in two, maybe three different ways. But the top ways, in my opinion, are going to be in terms of providing top shelf and quality pass catchers. That could be in the form of a tight end or a wide receiver. And of course, wide receiver probably going to be a bit more helpful in that situation. The Chargers must add talent this offseason to better position Justin Herbert, not just to thrive in the regular season, but to give ourselves a shot in the postseason. I'm kind of in that mode now. Are you guys not? Chargers fans, how you feel about that? Now at this point, the Chargers have built a pretty nice contender. The culture is here. The identity is here. Jim Harbaugh is here. My expectation for this upcoming season isn't so much, let's go and make the postseason. It's, I want to do something in the postseason now. Let's go grab a win or two. Let's make ourselves known as a contender for the Super Bowl in the next couple of seasons. And we can't roll out with the same wide receivers and expect different results this year if we're going to try and accomplish that goal. And I think the biggest indicator of that was our most recent playoff appearance versus the Houston Texans and how the wide receiver position struggled in that game. Not so much for Ladd McConkey, who did total 200 yards, some touchdowns and a very, very awesome rookie season, capping off a very cool season for him. But the remainder of the receivers in that game combined for something like 40 yards. There's like another 5 receivers that got involved in that game. It was ugly. And as amazing as Ladd McConkey was, the Chargers could not win that football game solely on the back and the efforts of that one wide receiver. We need more. And it's going to be a big topic of conversation for the Chargers in this upcoming season. The biggest rumor you're going to start hearing a lot about, and one that, again, I'm 100% endorsing. I would 100% be behind the idea of T. Higgins joining the fold, becoming a Los Angeles Charger in 2025. That would be a pretty big one. And it's one that I think is probably at the top of my list, even with all the rumors that we're hearing about DK Metcalf. But I don't know how much more. You know what I mean? Because the idea of DK is pretty exciting. And T. Higgins would be incredible. He's a big, sure-handed wide receiver, great route running. He could be that big presence that we need at wide receiver 1 to pair with Ladd McConkey. Like the quote said, it'd be really nice to get an inside-outside tandem that a pair like this could provide the offense. But there is a caveat here. T. Higgins is going to be paid like a number 1 wide receiver. We're seeing huge contracts handed out to the position as of late. And the rumor right now is that T. Higgins is going to cost upwards of $30 million to get on the roster for any team. Now, of course, the Chargers do have the money. If you guys haven't heard, the Chargers, I think right now, again, these are early projections, around $70 million, $72 million And there are some very likely cuts around the corner, including Joey Bosa, that will likely push us well over $100 million going into the season. So the money's not going to be an issue. The situation, however, is how do the Chargers want to allocate that? Because we have more problems than just wide receiver. We got guys that need extensions, guys that need a new contract. And we don't want to go blowing it all if we don't have to. Now, again, you can still make it work. T. Higgins is 100% worth it for me. But the situation with DK Metcalf, very interesting, providing a different avenue, one that doesn't break the bank, one that helps you cap-wise, one that helps you, in terms of grabbing a number one wide receiver to pair very well with Ladd McConkey. Really just get this whole system going in the way that you had envisioned it when you hired Jim Harbaugh. DK Metcalf, for me, kind of checks a lot of boxes. Now, some of you guys are going to be asking yourselves, well, director, in terms of an actual football player, in terms of a talent that comes onto the roster to help this team contend, does DK Metcalf still got it? Because, yeah, a lot of people will tell you, I saw a quote on Twitter saying, do I want another Mike Williams on the team, but more expensive? I don't think that's the situation at all. I think DK Metcalf is still one of the top shelf wide receivers in the NFL. And I think that his most recent play in 2024 and 2024 of having a bit of a lower and downswing year is only going to help the next team acquire him for a little cheaper. And a new situation for DK Metcalf is going to be very beneficial towards him coming back to that sort of status. Because DK Metcalf, to me, you put him on a different team, you're going to start seeing some different results in a very, very good way. Now, let's start off with, why DK Metcalf became so good, where he grabbed his reputation. I think most of it stems from his first couple of seasons with the Seattle Seahawks. And mind you, DK has posted 1,000 yards, if not very close to 1,000 yards, every single season of his career. He's not like Mike Evans, where he just edges out 1,000, but he will be very, very similar in a way where it's at least 1,000, if not better, with a lot of touchdowns behind him. Very good wide receiver play. In the first couple of seasons, however, I think that was pretty exceptional because of the quarterback situation that he had in Seattle. Russell Wilson back in 2019, right, was a different Russell Wilson than we're seeing today, and it's most certainly different than what we're seeing with what we saw with the Denver Broncos. In his first 2 years with Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf saw quarterback play to the tune of 4,000 yards a season, around 30 to 40 touchdowns a season. Very, very good situation if you're a number one wide receiver of the Seattle Seahawks, which at the time, Tyler Lockett. Then here comes DK, has a decent rookie season, follows it up with an awesome second season. DK Metcalf certainly set up to succeed behind the good Russell Wilson years. But in 2021, that's where things start to slow down a little bit for Russell Wilson. And the Seattle Seahawks start questioning to themselves, do we need to move on from big number 3? And you will see a little bit of dip in production from DK Metcalf because of that, but not too much. Russell Wilson in that season throwing for 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns. In that year, DK Metcalf still managed near 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns, so still a very strong season for DK Metcalf despite the dip in production at quarterback. The following season, 2022, is where things start to change in maybe a downward swing in terms of situation for DK. That's where the Geno Smith era would begin. Now, Geno Smith started off really cool, and he was an awesome story in that 2022 year, posting 4,000 yards. I can't remember the number of touchdowns, but this would help DK Metcalf reach, a pretty decent start with the new quarterback. 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, very, very nice season for him. 2023, however, is when things would slow down yet again. So you're kind of seeing a trend here. Good quarterback seasons followed by lesser quarterback seasons. Despite that, DK Metcalf is still very much so a very big and dangerous target. In 2023, Metcalf would produce 1,100 yards, 8 scores, but this would also produce another problem for DK Metcalf going forward, and that being the drafting of Jackson Smith and Jigba, JSN, and his rookie season would start spelling a little bit of less production for DK Metcalf going forward. The tide kind of shifted from there. JSN would lead the team in targets and receptions in 2024. We would see a career low, at least besides his rookie season, right? For DK Metcalf this year, still, close to 1,000 yards, but only 4 or 5 touchdowns. Not the best year for DK Metcalf. And again, as JSN starts to ascend, you start to question what the wide receiver room should look like in Seattle, okay? And that just opens a door for DK Metcalf to go to a new situation where he can be a big impact player, where he can produce at the level that he has been behind the good years of Russell Wilson and the one good year of Geno Smith. We can get back to that. We just need the situation to change in terms of quarterback play for DK Metcalf. Now, the contract is going to be a big point in this whole thing, too. And like I said, too, the Smith and Njigba connection also not helping things for DK Metcalf right now. Certainly going into a new situation where it's maybe a guy like Justin Herbert is going to help his situation a lot more. Now, okay, let's go to the contract here real quick. DK Metcalf is still a big name, right? And he's about to hit a contract year, which a lot of players in situations, or I should say on teams that have situations in terms of tight money, you're going to see some big moves, some big trades to get that money off the books, to help themselves out and getting some compensation back before the big name leaves the building. It all kind of makes sense here. Very similar to Keenan Allen's situation back with the Chargers last season, the cap hit is actually kind of dramatic. The cap hit this season for DK Metcalf, the 2024-2025, or should I say 2025-2026 season, is a whopping $31 million. That is just way too much to be paying a DK Metcalf at this point. And the Chargers were in a very similar situation with Keenan Allen last year. Another star receiver. Again, with recent history, we learned some pretty important lessons. Just because we loved Keenan Allen so much and he was still producing at a high level didn't mean that he was going to stay with the team, because that money was just too much, right? The bottom finally fell out. Now, the big difference between these two situations, though, is pretty massive. Keenan was over 30 years old. There was signs of slowing down. The money situation was kind of tight, right? DK Metcalf just turned 27. And these are considered the prime years of a wide receiver, between 26 and 30, right? For a lot of wide receivers. Start seeing a bit of slowing down, 29, 30, 31 years old. This is the prime of DK Metcalf. And DK, not just being a big name, would be a big impact player that makes a lot more sense to go trade for and add to a roster. You know, unlike what we had in trying to retain guys like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, who are all over the age of 30. Now, if the Seahawks were to cut or trade DK Metcalf, the money is kind of interesting, because they would have to eat some pretty big dead cap to the tune of $28 million, I think, when you add up some of the voided years they have on that contract, et cetera, et cetera. It would free something like $17 million in cap right now, but it's a lot of dead cap going into the future. So why would the Seattle Seahawks be doing something like this? Because the Chargers would only be on the hook for around, what, the price of $10 million, $17 million, I think is the number. However, I don't know how the void years would work in transferring to a new team. So we'll say, just to be safe, conservatively, $17 million would be the price tag for the Chargers this season, which is a pretty reasonable price for a player at the caliber of DK Metcalf, who would still need to be extended, mind you. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But $17 million in the first season, that's a huge discount to what we would be seeing from a guy like T. Higgins, who's likely going to cost $30 million plus in his contract per year. Now, the reason the Seattle Seahawks would have to do this, though, because you're thinking, why would they want to eat $28 million of cap? They're just helping the next team that he goes to, yada, yada, yada. There's a couple of motivations for this, okay? For one, yes, this is a contract year. So if you're going to get anything out of DK Metcalf, this is the year to do so. Are you going to pay the $31 million to keep him on the roster this season as well? That's also a very big motivation for the team to say, we probably need to move on from the contract. He's also still a big name. So if you're looking to trade him right now, you could get some decent compensation back, at least a third rounder, in my opinion, maybe even a little bit more. We'll go over the compensation here in just a little bit. But also, if you want to keep DK Metcalf around, let's say they do go with the $31 million this season, he stays on the roster. The money situation being as tight as it is, very interesting. Can they afford to extend him afterwards? When it's all said and done, can you get DK Metcalf to come back? I don't know. And is it going to be worth the price of a DK Metcalf this year with all the question marks they have around quarterback, with Geno Smith's future kind of up in the air with the team as well? Is now the time to throw down for a DK extension? I don't think so. I don't think they can afford him. And especially when you consider the situation of their money in 2024, man, the Seahawks are currently $27 million over the cap going into the offseason, and they still have some big roster holes that they got to fix. Wide receiver is not one of them. That position looks pretty solid for the Seahawks, even if DK Metcalf does depart. Now, of course, no Seattle Seahawks fan is going to tell you, hey, we got to get rid of DK. But the fact of the matter is, JSN is an ascending talent. And it feels like the Seattle Seahawks and DK Metcalf are just kind of destined to part ways at this point. Okay, so a lot of different things revolving around DK Metcalf departing, the Seattle Seahawks not being able to afford him, and the fit for the Chargers being the next question. If he were to depart from Seattle, why would the Chargers be the likely destination? Well, for one, let's start about the draws to LA. LA, nice area, right? Of course, everyone's trying to recover from the disaster that was the fires in LA right now. But outside of that, man, it's a highly coveted area with right now one of the best quarterbacks in the country, Justin Herbert. Think about this from DK's perspective right now. DK Metcalf has played behind some good seasons behind a quarterback, but mostly seasons behind the quarterback position. We talked about the 2 good years with Russell Wilson, the 1 bad. The 1 good year behind Geno Smith, the 2 bad. It's kind of 50 down the middle, isn't it? Justin Herbert would by far and away be the best quarterback situation for any player, certainly as a DK Metcalf, since playing behind prime. Not even prime, but the good years of Russell Wilson. Justin Herbert could easily take advantage of the talent, the archetype, and the speed that a DK Metcalf would bring to the table. You guys know what 40 time, this is a big stat that gets brought up all the time when the Chargers are talking about signing a wide receiver. Everyone wants to know, what's the 40? DK Metcalf, despite being one of the biggest human beings I've ever seen at the position, despite being 6'3" and jacked as heck, ran a 4.33. One of the fastest times you're going to see for a wide receiver, his size. Can you imagine what Justin Herbert would do with that kind of speed, man? I actually posted a clip earlier today. Imagine I said, give Herbert this target, GG's in the NFL. Look at that. Can you imagine a speed receiver like that with hands, with size, with muscle, with mass, paired up with a Justin Herbert? I think it would be a very dangerous combo, and one that will very much so be a draw to Los Angeles for a, not going to say free agent, but a new destination for a guy like DK. Justin Herbert, he needs it too, man. We've seen the season that was 2023, or should say 2024, 2025. That wasn't good at the wide receiver position. Justin Herbert, for a lot of the times, holding on to the football too long, looking for an open guy. If it wasn't Ladd who was there, it just was not good for Justin Herbert, who didn't have as much time as we were hoping in the pocket due to poor interior offensive line play. He needs help out there. And at this point, it feels like DK Metcalf a very good option to make that happen. Let's get those guys paired up and see what they can do in terms of lighting the league on fire. And it's one of the biggest things that was mentioned in the quote from Jeremy Fowler provided by the anonymous NFL coordinator. I think Los Angeles will be looking to help the quarterback position. Justin Herbert to Metcalf would be scary. And he's not wrong. Jim Harbaugh as well, man. Another lord to LA. This is a pretty big one, man. The Chargers have a certain way of wanting to attack on offense going forward. A lot of us were expecting this very dramatic pivot to the run game, which of course in some ways it did happen. For the most part though, Jim Harbaugh identified some of the strengths of this team and we sort of rolled with it. The big one being, Justin Herbert, the talent that he brings to the table at quarterback. It's something that, Jim Harbaugh certainly leaned on this year, but it doesn't mean that's going to be the case going forward. Going forward, the biggest trait I think you're going to see in how the team builds behind the idea of what Jim Harbaugh wants is toughness. And that can come in the form of very many different ways. Toughness in the offensive line, toughness on defense, toughness at every position, including wide receiver, which a lot of times people forget how involved that position can be in helping the run game. It was a big emphasis for the Chargers in the past. If you couldn't block, you're not going to be running routes. It's especially relevant now with Jim Harbaugh being at the helm of this offense, wanting to make sure that this offense is finally tuned and ready to go. DK Metcalf really checks a lot of boxes for this system, man. He's a very capable run blocker, but his mass certainly could be put to the test, could be put to use in terms of blocking. His physicality, you can almost line him up at tight end at times, right? And think, okay, this guy belongs in this position. That's just how big he is. He feels like a very true Jim Harbaugh guy in terms of archetype, in terms of mass, in terms of toughness. And it's something that I really feel that would fit the identity of this team beautifully. The Chargers also need another red zone target desperately. That's another stat that I think kind of gets swept under the rug a bit after this year. We just were not good in the red zone, man. We got up to the point of scoring. We could not put it in. And I feel like the lack of targets from what we had in the past is certainly becoming an issue for Justin Herbert. Thinking about some of the red zone guys that we had. On the right side, there's Jared Cook, one of the former tight ends. Think of the other tight ends we had. Donald Parham, no longer with the team, right? The tight end's not very much so involved this season. Mike Williams, one of the best red zone targets we had in a long time, not with the team. The Chargers, who were very tall and very red zone, threats, no longer that way. We need that sort of threat for Justin Herbert because at the end of the day, what good is an offense that doesn't score touchdowns? DK Metcalf is one of the best options to accomplish that. Certainly T. Higgins as well, and there's going to be other options maybe through the draft as well. But right now, to me, DK Metcalf is a very good option to accomplish that, and it solves a huge problem that resulted in the Chargers not winning enough football games. Sure, 11 wins, awesome, very impressive, but where it really counted, the Chargers could not produce versus the Houston Texans. If we had a target like DK Metcalf, I guarantee you the situation's at least a little bit improved in terms of how the offense would produce. DK would likely look at this destination too because of relationships, and this is a pretty big one too that I think unless you're really looking, you're not going to realize how big of an impact something like this could be for the football player going to a new situation. Familiarity can be pretty huge, man. We've seen it with players like Khalil Mack, recently being traded to the Chargers because of Brandon Staley and those relationships. Sanjay Lal is a big one, man. A very respected wide receivers coach, and one that does have a relationship with DK Metcalf back in their days in Seattle. And relationships kindle success on the field for a lot of people, man. You saw Justin Herbert. He desperately wanted his quarterbacks coordinator back, Sanjay Lal, the Chargers wide receiver coordinator, again, he once coached DK Metcalf. Here's these guys yucking it up and now bringing a lot of success to the Los Angeles Chargers. You have to imagine that that's going to bring motivation to a guy like DK Metcalf, not just to come to the Chargers, but to find new life. Because in the seasons that these two were together in Seattle, we saw the best years from DK Metcalf produced. 1,000-yard seasons, 20 apiece, 24 touchdowns combined. Incredible run when these two were in the same building. What's funny enough is that Sanjay Lal was with the Seattle Seahawks in 2020. He departed for one season and then came back for seasons 2022 and 2023. Those 3 seasons were the 3 best seasons for DK Metcalf. And I feel like the relationship here is quite obvious. These two, very much so in respect of each other. They found a lot of success with each other. And now, Sanjay Lal being a Los Angeles Charger would be a big motivation, not just for DK Metcalf to come to LA, but be successful in LA. Finally, what's the compensation? That's going to be the big question I hear a lot in this video. What are the Chargers giving up? Because this would be a trade situation, right? Let's not forget that. Maybe the Seattle Seahawks would cut him. I think that's highly unlikely. I think if they're going to move on from him, they're going to want some compensation in their pocket in terms of draft capital. I've read that Seattle will want a second rounder in exchange for DK Metcalf, which, to be clear, I wouldn't hate that if especially we could return something in terms of like we could turn a 4th or 5th round pick a round higher, so like a 4th into a 3rd or a 5th into a 4th. If we could do something like that with the 2nd round pick, maybe we could pull that off, but it just doesn't seem very likely given all the surrounding circumstances revolving around DK Metcalf's name and situation. A 3rd and change feels more reasonable given DK's recent production and contract obligations. It feels like that is probably something that the Chargers could pull off. But to be clear, I wouldn't hate a 2nd round option either if it did return something extra to the Chargers in terms of upgrading a pick or 2 or something like that. But that's kind of where we're at. Either a 2nd and change, or say either a 2nd for DK Metcalf and change from the Seattle Seahawks, or a third and change from the Chargers in exchange for DK Metcalf. That feels kind of like the most likely scenario that could go down right now. I'm highly in favor of the third, but you never know what would happen. And again, it would be worth it because the Chargers get a bona fide number, one wide receiver, 1A, 1B with Ladd McConkey instantly without the worry about, is he going to, come into the system? Is he going to fit right? He's going to have a good rookie year. Can he produce now? All of that out the window. We know all that exists with DK Metcalf. As for an extension, I think it's safe to say DK wouldn't be pulling $30 million a season like T. Higgins would. I'd look for something closer to the range of like $20 million. What feels very reasonable to me is like $23, $24 million a season. That feels like a good fit for what DK Metcalf has produced in his career so far. It fits the need of what the Chargers are looking for. The system, all of it feels right. And that's kind of what I'm looking for the Chargers right now as well. Feels pretty reasonable to me. Feels pretty reasonable in terms of compensation for the Seattle Seahawks. That's the image I was supposed to show you guys right there. The last thing I did want to bring up, though, is something I call the last chance Chargers. Because a big point I'm seeing against the idea of DK Metcalf coming to the Chargers is that at times he's shown a bit of character issues, right? Nothing crazy like to the depths of other players that we've seen mentioned linked to the Chargers like Tyreek Hill. Nothing to that extent. But it's something that the Chargers and its organization not very well known for. We don't really put up with stuff like that. However, if you take a look at recent history, the first season of the Chargers behind Jim Harbaugh, you will notice a lot of players that, let's say, less character attitudes, but more of situations, they did get a chance with the Chargers. One of them did have a very big character problem, one that a lot of coaches would have written off like that, and that was Teair Tart. If you guys don't know, Teair Tart was let go because he just was not putting in the effort. A lot of times a lack effort guy, late to meetings, all this kind of stuff. The things that you would expect from a guy that would get cut. And of course, he got cut not just from the Titans, but the Texans, 2 or 3 teams, maybe 3 or 4 teams, as a matter of fact, before he landed with the Chargers. And he had a great season with the Bolts this year. That shows me that this isn't the same Chargers from before. They're willing to take shots on players, see how things go. Of course, that's a little bit of a lower risk, higher reward situation in Teair Tart, but they did it, and they were the team to make it happen. I think DK Metcalf, whose character problems are definitely more, I don't know, they're put at the surface a little bit more than they probably should be, is not as big of a deal as a guy like Teair Tart. And I think it would definitely, especially being reunited with a guy like Sanjay Lal, being on a Jim Harbaugh team, not be as big of an issue with the Chargers as it maybe was at times with the Seattle Seahawks. So finally, to answer the question, would I do it? Would I add DK Metcalf to the roster of the Chargers? Would I trade, let's be conservative here, a second-round pick to get DK Metcalf on the team? Maybe we do get some kickback there. Would I pay him $24 million a season, an extension after that? To all of that, I'm going to say yes. I mean, again, take a look at that clip I posted right there, dude. Imagine a target that big, that fast, with great hands, great route running. It just feels like the magic formula fit for the Chargers. He just turned 27, folks, literally a month ago. So he'll be playing on his 27-year-old season for the Chargers, his first contract year with us. Then going forward, let's see how many more he's got in him, right? But it just feels like such a good fit right now. A great segue to maybe some better wide receiver classes, because this class ain't bad, but it's not as great as the last 2 classes that we've seen, and it solves a problem immediately. It brings, again, a little bit of star power, which is exciting, because that's going to draw some more attention from other free agents, but more so the talent and the fit that we're looking for. A 4.33 speed, 6'3" wide receiver, red zone target. He checks all the boxes for me. Definitely more affordable than T. Higgins, which he's only 2 years older than T. Higgins, which you have to keep that in your minds too when you're thinking between the two. He would be cheaper than T. Higgins. I don't know. It just all kind of feels right to me. I'm very much so behind the idea of DK Metcalf to the Chargers. What do you guys think? Very important question to the audience. What do you guys think? Would you do it? That's the high end of everything. That's what I think the max would be in return for the Seattle Seahawks. A second-round pick, an extension for DK Metcalf to the tune of $24 million a season. Is that something that you would do, Chargers fans? Because I think I would. And I think that's being generous to the Seattle Seahawks. I don't think it's going to be a second rounder. I think it's going to be more likely a third rounder and change. think it's going to be more likely $22 or $23 million a season for DK Metcalf, which, again, worth it when compared to some of the top shelf wide receivers in the NFL. And most importantly, we're going to help out in the best way possible a couple of guys that deserve the help more than anybody. Justin Herbert and freaking Ladd McConkey, man. These guys need help. DK Metcalf would be a great fit to make that happen. I'm very much so behind the idea. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you like what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. As always, bolt up, stay frosty. Let's get DK Metcalf in powder blue, man. I think it'll be an awesome move for your Los Angeles Chargers.